Last question for you. We've spent the week hearing about and struggling with very large problems and some large solutions. But there's been a spirit of optimism throughout. And a lot of that spirit has come from a sense that the next generation is an idealistic generation, a generation that will do, that will serve, that has a sense of community. You've spent the last several months, for some family reason, traveling around the country with Chelsea. Say a word to the young people who have come here to Ideas Fest about what you see in them.
Well, first of all, I think that people, you should be highly optimistic. First of all, nobody knows. Let's just take climate change. Everybody knows something bad's going to happen, and it's going to be really bad, and nobody knows when, and we're all estimating that, right? So the world is always full of those kind of problems. I mean, we labored through decades of a Cold War when it would have been really bad if a nuclear bomb had gone off. And climate change, in a way, has the capacity to do even more damage. But the point is, you can't afford to live your life that way. This generation of young people has been empowered by the internet, access to information, and is the most socially active generation ever in terms of non-political things, trying to work through non-governmental groups to do things. That's why we had our global initiative this year had a whole separate thing just for university kids at Tulane, and we had students from 40 states and 15 countries show up. And that I've never seen more invigorated young people. I couldn't run, our AIDS project has 500 people, and a third of them are working for room and board and travel. They're not making any money. They're just young people who want to go out there and save lives and have an experience where they think they're making the world a better place. So I am actually quite optimistic about this. I think what is important, however, is that every young person realizes that this kind of service is not an option in an interdependent world. I applaud this generation of young people because it was an option and they took it. But in an interdependent world where government cannot solve all the problems, and there will always be a gap in the bounty any private sector will produce and the social dislocations that the government can close, every citizen, the definition of citizenship in the 21st century will be get an education, obey the law, go to work, pay your taxes, be an informed citizen, vote for the people you think will do the best job, and figure out what you can do, to join with like-minded people to make positive changes in the public good. That I think that's the one thing I would say, that we have to change the definition of citizenship so you can't pat yourself on the back for paying your taxes, obeying the law, taking care of your family, and being a good voter. You have to be a public servant as a private citizen. The interdependent world demands it. If we do it, I'm very optimistic. And I'd just like to say one last thing in closing about this. These problems are hard. If they were simple, we wouldn't be here talking about them. Somebody just go out and do it. We'd be talking about something else. They require dialogue. It's easy for Americans to say, gosh, how intolerant the Taliban is. You know, we don't want them to get a hold of Afghanistan again. They were so horrible to the women, to the girls, so repressive and all that. But one of the things that bothers me about America is that we can maximize our impact if we reach out to people who are different from ourselves. And I don't mean just racially different. I mean people who have different experiences and think differently than we do. And that's why I think this Ideas Festival is important. And I want to recommend a book. I sometimes do this when I come here. I'll recommend a book to you. I read a book written by a guy who coincidentally is a liberal Democrat. But no, wait till I tell you what the book says. It's called The Big Sort. His name is Bill Bishop, lives in Texas. And he says, okay, America is growing much more diverse as a country. We're more diverse racially and ethnically and religiously, and we're more tolerant of gays, and everything's great, blah, blah, blah. But the truth is, we are growing more isolated in our communities because we are living more and more only with people we agree with. And we are growing more isolated in our political debates because we have access to more information than ever before, but we look at the television news and we read the websites of people who confirm what we think already. This is not good in a democracy. And I urge you to read it. I'll just give you one little factoid about it. In 1976, when President Carter and President Ford had a very close race for president, it was close in America. There were only 20% of our counties that voted for either one of them by more than 20%. In everybody else, every other place in America, there was a raging, ongoing debate among friends and neighbors and people that went to church or synagogue or, mosque or wherever together. They were all sitting there talking about this. And they were trying to build a sense of national unity out of their genuine concerns and debates. By 2004, when we had another close election between Senator Kerry and President Bush, it was also very close. But 48.5% of our counties voted for one or the other of them by more than 20 points. And Bishop has got a story in here, unbelievable story, about a brilliant developer in Southern California who did a market survey, and he found that in the area where he had the property, so he had to do the development, conservative Republicans and liberal Democrats were almost evenly divided. So, and he had one gated community he had to build. So on the left side, he built houses that suited conservative Republicans, and on the right side, he built places where you could have yoga and meditation and everything that suited liberal Democrats. And he actually sold it out immediately, divided exactly as he had predicted from his market surveys. Now, we're laughing about this, but some of us are going to have to cross the street, folks. That's the last thing I want to say to you. We got to, it was an amazing thing. So that's the other thing I would say to young people. Do public service, not just with somebody who looks different than you do, but who thinks differently than you do. The way we don't need a phony unity in this country. The Founding Fathers understood that debate and differences were healthy. But you have to have them in a way that allows you to see the person who disagrees with you as a human being. Once we start doing big things together, we'll figure out how to do it, and we'll do just fine. You should be actually quite optimistic. I never dreamed that I would see this level of commitment. But you should be worried about the climate change issue, this identity problem, and you should be really worried that your country's had more increase in inequality in this decade than any time since the 1920s. It ought to bother you that I just went to a store down here that I used to visit every time when I came to Aspen, and they moved to a much smaller venue because they couldn't afford to rent anymore because things are so good here. But 90% of the benefits of this decade have gone to just 10% of us. And that ought to bother you. So you need to know there's tens of millions of your fellow Americans who, as we sit here and think about the higher things, are desperate. And every week they're deciding whether they can afford to fill up their gas tank and go to work or put food on the table for their kids. And so we don't need to get too smug here in whether we're Democrats or Republicans and how enlightened and concerned we are. We got a lot of big challenges. But as long as the young people of America define their citizenship as they seem to be determined to do, you should be optimistic about the future. Thank you.